just don't want you spying on me, that's all.
Who's spying? I'm not spying. Of course, if you want to be bloody secretive...
I'm not secretive.
Where have you been, then?
As a matter of fact, I have been to see Dr. Zhivago.
Ah. What did he say? When you say you're not secretive, I didn't even know you were ill.
Leonard was a great mechanic of comedy. He knew the nuts and bolts of it. He knew how it worked. He knew scientifically how a laugh was elicited from an audience.
Oh, can't you just smell those Italian wines, suffused with herbs and spices from four continents? I'm being boring. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Getting your head down, sweetie. Jolly good idea.
I'm sure people will say, oh, he was very difficult to work with and things like that. I know he has possibly that reputation, but he was only, I think, difficult if he felt people weren't pulling their weight.
I never found him demanding towards anybody else other than himself.
Morning, Joan.
Mr. Perry.
11 minutes late. Somebody had stolen the lines at Soperton.
He was a very private man. And what he wanted was for the world to see what he did, not know who he was.
Born in Liverpool, Leonard Rossiter's first career was as an insurance salesman. He discovered his acting talent through amateur dramatics, and at the age of 26, turned professional.
I think one sensed when one first saw him that he was exceptional and different in that he had a sort of manic, farcical talent.
I think his great strength, his great success as an actor was that he could adapt to practically anything.
Yes, well, now, as I was saying...
Leonard Rossiter's diverse career spanned 30 years. Before achieving success in his television sitcoms, he appeared in 150 stage productions, numerous television dramas, and some of the most important films of the 1960s.
He was always doing 25 hours in every 24, and one occasionally got a little bit worried.
He worked hard because he knew that he'd got to work hard because it's such a difficult profession anyway, but also he wasn't very good looking. He was never going to be a matinee idol. And I think it was just single-mindedness.
You need a certain flair to be successful. You see, it's an art, yes, but not intellectual. It's more animalistic. But above all, you see, you must have three things: intuition, cunning, instinct.
I know he had this tremendous power, tremendous presence. I remember seeing him in Steptoe's Son, where he played an escaped prisoner, again, very strong. And to come onto that show and almost overpower Wilfred Bramble and Harry Corbett, it shows how strong he was.
Blimey, you better have the packet here. I've got some more. I did a machine on the way out.
And I thought, well, my gosh, you know, I don't know about the comedy, but he's such a powerful figure that he'd be a wonderful Rigsby. And I know we weren't the only people after him at the time. So everybody knew that he had a situation comedy in him if he wanted to play it. Thank God he wanted to play ours.
He was a wonderful teacher for me because it was my first job. And Len would take me aside and say, if you do it like this, it's funny. If you do it the way you're doing it, it's not. And he was right on every occasion. You know, you couldn't help but be dumbfounded by his technical virtuosity.
Now look, when you enter
You had to watch the whole of him to get the full flavour of Len's acting style. I remember he was telling Alan, when he was going to meet a middle-class lady, how to enter a room in polite society. And his whole... I mean, he did the whole thing beautifully choreographed. It was the same every time, and at the dress, it was superb. And I remember saying to Len, that was fantastic. And he just looked at me and grinned and said, I've been doing it a long time, Eric.
You enter a room, you're in. You close the door, you wait for the conversation to die down, you shoot your cuffs like that, and then you adjust them, leaving just visible the diamond cufflinks. When you're bidden to sit, shall I sit? You sit, you come over, it's fingers on the trousers, up, down, to avoid any stiffness, just a casual throw of the leg over, with nonchalant ease, and then you're that's it, right, that's it. You stay out from the door in, conversation, now shoot the comes through, just as once you beat to sit down, goes down the trial, catch and nonchalantly, right, come on.
He absolutely loved Richard Beckinsale. He really loved him. I think everybody did. But he really loved him, and they got on tremendously well together.
Richard was very laid back, and he absorbed a lot of Len's frenetic energy, which was good for the show, because we couldn't have had two people like Len in the show.
Where is he? Where is he? Where do you think you're going? What's the matter, Rigsby? What's the matter? You say that after nearly poisoning me? You're exaggerating. I was drunk to the eyeballs. I slept for 24 hours. I still can't feel my teeth.
When you were filming with Francis and Leonard, they would rehearse together, okay, you'd shoot the scene, and then when you finished shooting and we're all happy with it, they would just go respectively, almost like boxers, to their own corners. Because, personally, I don't think they had anything in common. Politically, they certainly had nothing in common. She was very left-wing, and I think Leonard very Tory, very conservative.
Leonard only got irritated with people who he felt were not pulling their full weight, and I don't think he ever felt that with Francis.
I'm afraid there's something of the Philistine about you, Mr. Rigsby.
It's very nice of you, Miss Jones.
Len met somebody who was comically as adroit as he was.
Mr. Rigsby, you're talking wildly. Stop looking at me like that.
Like what, Miss Jones?
So passionately.
Well, it's how I feel, Miss Jones.
Oh, you shouldn't. I must say you can be very plausible sometimes, very persuasive, Mr. Rigsby. I don't know if it's the light, but you look strangely fascinating this evening.
Although the setting was absurd, it was rooted in a truth of a lonely man looking for love that gave it something more than just comedy. There was a pathos there too.
Yes. You may not know this, Miss Jones, but I happen to be a bit of an expert on Indian food.
Really, Mr.
Yes,
Rigsby?
yes, oh yes, the tandoori chicken, the Bombay duck, yes. I particularly like the vindaloo, yes. Mind you, afterwards it's usually a case of where's the loo? if you pardon my vernacular, Miss Jones. Now then, what's this little delicacy here?
Oh, well, that's the hot flannel.
I knew that something was happening with the show because on the Friday nights we had the dress, and the dress would normally take place in front of, say, a dozen people. And then, strangely, as the series went on, people came out of the offices at Yorkshire, and suddenly you've got about 100 people watching the dress rehearsals. So I realised that Len and Richard and Francis and Don had got something that was working very, very well. People always accuse us in situation comedy of using canned laughter. We had to suppress the laughter on that show, to keep it within reasonable bounds.
He worked very hard, so consequently everybody else worked very hard. The effort that he put into those shows was phenomenal. At the end of it, sometimes the man was absolutely exhausted. It was the passion that was there was frightening. He would be so wound up. I mean, it was like a sort of spring that just went on and on and on and on and on and on. And you thought, what's going to happen? You felt the top of his head was going to blow off. But it was fantastic. That was the way he was. And we were like people holding him to the ground.
His performance had to be perfect, down to the tiniest little detail. He was ruthless with himself. There was no room for a laugh that didn't deliver. There was no room for a mistimed moment. And as a result, I think he felt he had the right, I think he did have the right, to expect the absolute best from everybody else. When he got it, he was
wonderful. When he didn't, he was intolerant.
He was a superb comedian. I mean, his timing was impeccable. The way he used his voice and his body movements and everything.
Gin gin.
That's Vincenzo's.
Oh, some local brew, is it? You've been pulling my leg, darling. Those fine Italian rosé wines, that subtle blend of herbs and spices, that's a Cinzano rosé, you little tease.
The first time that we rehearsed, I was quite in awe of him in a way, because I thought he was such a genius comic, you know, as well as being a very good actor. He was a bit shy of me, and I was a bit shy of him.
Melissa, darling, you're early. Would you like a Cinzano?
No, thank you. I just had one. When ITV went on strike one year, they said they got more complaints that they couldn't see the Leonard Rossiter, Joan Collins ads than about most of the programming.
Ah, Cinzano Bianco. Oh. Yes, that subtle blend of herbs and wines, fused with spices.
Do you mind?
Not at all.
I think it would be fair to say he was an eccentric. I think that was his great strength in Rising Damp and Reggie Perrin.
Hippopotamus?
Although vastly different characters, they both had an eccentric urgency about them.
I don't think my members would appreciate that nomenclature.
Well, that's what they are, isn't it? Marxist scum, ribs under the handbags. Oh, flush them out!
All right, we're all coming out, then.
You're all set!
Right, you...
He was always a wonderful leading man, and when we came to Reggie Perrin, I mean, the great success of that story, apart from the writing, was the fact that we were led by a genius.
CJ!
Morning, CJ.
I want to see you, Reggie.
Yes, certainly, CJ. Straight away, it suits me best. Certainly, CJ. Seeing CJ straight away.
Leonard knew what he was doing, which I love in people, because it only enhances your own performance if you're working. It's like a tennis match. If you're playing somebody better than you, you're usually much better because you're trying so hard or you're concentrating.
What is this crisis all about, Mr. Perrin?
There is no crisis, Joan. I'm sorry, forget it, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. I'm awfully sorry. No, I'm terribly sorry, I shouldn't have...
He knew where a shot should be, and he wasn't afraid to say, I think the shot should be this way, or wouldn't it be better if you did this?
Put him on green, would you? Thank you. Tony, I just... Tony, yes, just a minute. I told you to put him on green, you put him on red, because I'm on yellow. Tony!
He always gave, you know, definitely 150%. And, but I mean, he was like that with everything. When we played squash, he had to win, and win by a huge margin. I mean, I remember going to see him play charity cricket matches, he had to score 100, he had to take 10 wickets. I mean, I think it was just anything he did, and I'm sure probably if he'd stayed an insurance agent, he would have had to be the top insurance agent in Liverpool.
He was very competitive. He did not like losing. Didn't like losing at squash, and we used to play, regrettably, tennis together, and I wasn't a bad tennis player, but it used to lead to nasty scenes, because if I did a good shot, he was not best pleased, and if I did a bad shot, he was equally not best pleased.
We played squash together, and he was, you know, I was 21. Len was then, I suppose, mid-40s. We went into the gym, he was very quiet, he said, well, you know, I'll do my best, I'm getting on now. And I was really looking forward to beating him, because I thought, this is one thing I can do better than you. And I have to say, he made such a fool of me on the court. I have never been so tired in my life, and he did not work up a sweat. He just stood in the middle of the court and popped the ball about and made me run till I was on my knees. I learned something then. I learned something about Len.
An evening with Leonard was exhilarating. It was funny, it was argumentative, it was
loud. It was just, it was a real social workout.
People always used to say, oh, is your dad funny at home? Does he tell loads of jokes at home? Well, no, not really. He's just like a normal dad. I wouldn't say he was difficult to live with, no. I mean, he was certainly not an autocratic father. My mother might well have found him difficult to live with.
I don't think you can get two very strong characters in a house, and certainly in a marriage, without it being fairly up and downish. But we shared a great sense of humour, and our original meeting was, and, getting together was all based on having a great laugh, and we laughed always, so laughter usually came into it in the end.
Hey, what's on then?
Macmillan and wife.
There's football on the other channel.
Yes, well, we're watching Macmillan.
No, I don't mind.
Leonard always was suspicious of the media. He was doorstepped quite often. There would be a ring at the doorbell. He'd go to the door quite happily, and there would be somebody saying, is it true you had an argument with so-and-so, So he said he gave it up.
When you look at his interviews and things, he doesn't look very comfortable.
You've enjoyed enormous success, 8, 9,
Yes, I have
10 years.
enjoyed it, yes. No, I mean it literally. Yes,
you have
you
enjoyed
used the
it.
word.
You have enjoyed it.
I think there was a line between his professional life and private life. I mean, the idea of, if he'd been alive now, the idea of doing hello or something like that, he'd have absolutely loathed the very sort of idea of anything like that. Just because I think he'd think, well, why should anyone be interested?
He didn't think he had the equipment that the press could play with, whatever that is. He didn't get the recognition he felt he deserved. And I think he has a point, or he had a point, in that, he was really a master craftsman.
Although well known for his television sitcoms, Leonard Rossiter's success in the theatre is less widely appreciated. His award-winning performance as Bertolt Brecht's Arturo Ui and his one-man show The Immortal Haydn won him great critical acclaim.
Scream, you cry, help, Mary, you look at my balls, but you do not see them, your eyes are open, but your senses are shut.
Before I met Leonard, I heard that he was keen to cast me in Luke by Joe Orton. Leonard was very, very scary. He was scary for two reasons. One, he was by temperament rather snappy and perfectionist. And for two, he was brilliant.
I don't know why his impact on me was so great. I think it's that once Leonard became your friend, he was your friend with the same intensity that he brought to everything else. And I grew to love him. When he died, I think I was more distraught than about any death that I can recall in the whole of my lifetime.
He was very rarely ill. He had complained of some chest pains, and he went to the Brompton, I think it was, and had some tests, and they said there's absolutely nothing wrong. But he had no inkling of not feeling well. None at all. None at all.
He'd come in, he'd wandered about in the wings before the show. He wasn't on first, but he always did that, just to get a feel of the house. And then he wandered back to his dressing room. The show started, did the first scene. On he came for the second scene. Off he went. And we always knew when he was about to come on, because Leonard would appear at the frosted door, and the audience would go, ooh. And on the night that he died, there was no ooh. They went to his dressing room, and there was no answer, and it was locked, and so the door was broken down.
They rang me from the theatre to say he'd collapsed. And my daughter was 12, and I knew I had to get to the theatre, but I also knew I couldn't leave her without someone with her, because I knew the press would be on to it very soon, and I didn't want her picking up the phone and them telling her any bad news. And I got to the theatre and they said he'd been taken to the Middlesex hospital. So I went to the hospital. And by that time he was in, I suppose they were trying to see if they could save him. And I was just put in a little room and waited. And eventually, poor young doctor, I felt so sorry for him, had to come and tell me. But the hospital were very good, got me out of a back door because by that time they were all there. And I got home, and then of course it's very difficult to tell a child, but she was marvellous.
Funnily enough, I remember him leaving that night because I must have read it or something, somewhere in one of the papers said, Leonard Rossiter has a Roman nose. And I said, you've got a Roman nose, because he had this mirror right by our door. And he sort of looked in the mirror and he said, Roman all over my face, so boom, boom. And like, oh, God, it's a terrible joke, you know. And he always used to say it. I think obviously I must have said that to him before, but I don't know why. I'm probably, it's completely stupid, but it just stuck in my mind. I thought, it's a really silly thing to say. And then that was it. That was the last time I saw him.
Gillian asked me to speak the eulogy at his memorial service. And that was a very difficult thing to do, because I couldn't pretend that he was this easygoing, lovable guy, that I couldn't make that speech, because the church was going to be full of 1,000 people who knew Len. So I said he was a perfectionist, and that I hoped that God, if Leonard was indeed going up there, I hoped that God knew what he was in for. And that the pearly gates had better open on cue, and the heavenly choir had better sing in tune. And it made everybody in the church sort of rock with laughter, because they all recognized the truth of it. And happily, it didn't offend Gillian. I suppose she knew too.
You see bits of him in those characters, but it's not like having him there, but it's, I guess, the next best thing.
You feel the loss of an actor really dependent upon how easy it is to find somebody else who can play the same parts. There is and was nobody else who can play a part the way Len used to. He was genuinely unique.
Merry Christmas, Mr. Rigsby.
Yes.
And Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy New Year. Solitary, miserable card. All the best, Rigsby. Happy Christmas. And oh God, my writing's getting worse than ever.